of its drying operation. This particular chemical operation, which is generally the last operation carried out in industry for conversion of wet solids to the dry solids. When our main product is solid, then this is the general last operation which is required for the product conversion of wet solids to dry. So this particular operation is used to remove the moisture from wet solids by vaporization to get dry solids. So here heat is supplied to that wet solid, due to which moisture associated with that wet solid that gets vaporized and it is removed. Second point, the product removed from top is moisture. So when you heat that wet solid, automatically moisture gets vaporized. Being the vapor density less, that gets removed from the top of the dryer. That means when heat is received by this moisture, that gets vaporized and that is removed from top. So this top product in this case will be the moisture. So top product in this particular case will be moisture, and that will be removed from the top of the dryer. Okay. Then coming to the third point here, the product removed from bottom is dried solids. So naturally, if the dried solids density more, so that will be definitely removed from the bottom of the dryer. Okay. So the product that is removed from the bottom is called dry solids. Okay. So how you define this particular drying operation? So this drying operation is defined as conversion of wet solids to dried solids. Okay, so this particular operation is defined as an operation in which wet solid gets converted to dried solids. So this is nothing but the drying operation. Conversion of wet solid to dry solid is nothing but the drying operation. Okay. Now I explain you the drying operation with respect to block diagram. And in this block diagram, A stands for solids. In this block diagram, A stands for solids and B stands for moisture. That means component A, that will be the solid, and component B, that will be the moisture. Okay. Now here we have this particular block diagram of drying operation in which we have this drying operation. Here we have the drying operation, and the equipment which is used for this drying operation is called dryer. And to this dryer, incoming stream will be the wet solids. And there are two output streams, that one is the moisture removed and second one is the dried solids. Okay, so these are the two output streams and one input stream drying. And for this, indirectly or number of times directly, heat is supplied in terms of hot air. This heat is supplied. So hot air directly contact with the wet solid, moisture gets removed. Okay, and with the help of this hot air, number of times this heat is supplied to the wet solid. So here in this wet solid there are two components, A solid, B moisture. Okay, in here there are two components, A and B, and this fraction of A in wet solid given by XAW. X stands for fraction, A stands for solid, W stands for wet solid. Okay, and XDW is what? Fraction of moisture in wet solid. Okay, so this will be the composition of your wet solid. Now coming to the moisture removed. Coming to the top product here, moisture removed. Definitely here there will not be solid, only moisture will be there, and therefore here if you write down the fraction of solid in moisture, that will be 0, So remaining all will be the moisture, and so fraction of moisture in this moisture removed, that will be 100% into 1. Okay, so that means here in moisture removed, all moisture will be there, no solids. So coming to the next stream here, dried solid. Next stream here, dried solid, which is the bottom stream from the dryer, and here XAD means for fraction of solids in dried solids, and XBD means for fraction of moisture in dried solids. Okay, the important thing here, conversion of wet solids to dried solids, moisture fraction here will be less. This XBD, that means fraction of moisture in dried solid, that must be less than XBW. That means XBW, that is fraction of moisture in wet solid, that must be more than fraction of moisture in dry solid, because here our operation is drying, that means we are removing certain amount of moisture. Okay, so this is the important condition when you go for the drying operation, that must less. Okay, so fraction of moisture in dry solid, that must be less than whatever input. That is the essential thing, you can see that. Now with respect to this operation, again we have to write down material balance equation. So which are these material balance equation? First material balance equation we have studied, that is called TMB, that is total material balance. So here if you observe this, that means there are only one input stream. Which is the input stream? This wet solid is the input stream. And there are two output streams. Which are the two output streams? Moisture removed and dried solid. So these are the two output streams. And therefore you get this first material balance equation, that wet solid is equal to moisture removed plus dried solid. Okay, this is our first material balance equation. That is W is equal to M plus D. This is our first material balance equation, that is total material balance equation. Now coming to the second material balance equation. Second material balance is component material balance. And here we will take the component material balance of solid. Okay, so whatever solids in the wet solid, all solids will get dried solid. Okay, this is our second material balance. Whatever solids in wet solid, all solids will get in the dry solid. So we write down the second material balance equation. Okay, second material balance equation is here our component A is nothing but the solid. Notice that balance, solids in wet solid, that must equal to solids in dry solid. And the solids in wet solid is given by this particular formula. What is that formula? W is what? Amount of wet solid into fraction of solids in wet solid. Okay, so this total quantity gives amount of solids in wet solid. This total quantity gives amount of solids in dried solids, and this dried solids calculated here by this formula, solids in dried solids. D is the total amount of dried solids, and XAD means fraction of solids in dried solids. Okay, so this is our second equation. So these two equations we are going to use. To calculate unknown parameter about this particular operation. Okay, unknown parameter of this particular operation. Okay, so with this I stop here.